Well, hello, everyone. We're going to wrap up the discussion today about buildings. So, I'm going to start out talking a little bit about looking at kind of sustainable design and what that means, and then also getting into a little bit about generally about buildings, and then kind of focus in on the Heritage Center as an example of that. So, just with the impact of buildings, that you can see building use, there's 49 million gallons of water per day that's used, 12% or 12% of potable water is used, and 136 million tons of construction and demolition waste just in the United States. And 30% of US waste output, 30% of US raw materials are used in buildings. And then also the impact of buildings, the human health and productivity. Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors. Now, it sounds like maybe we're trying to change some of that today too, so that's encouraging. But there's the sick building syndrome and building-related illnesses. And just kind of showing you with the world population and how it's growing and the impact of the number of people in the world, and then the number of buildings that equate to that as well. The future impact of buildings. You can see that lower line is industry, the middle line is transportation, and that red line at the top is buildings. So again, and this is looking at the CO2 emissions. So I've got some pictures of downtown Bismarck, our CAT system for transportation and how that's improving, but also the industry we have in North Dakota and its impact. And looking a little bit at what is sustainable design. And it seeks to reduce negative impacts on the environment and on health and comfort of building occupants, and thereby improving building performance. But it's also the basic objectives are to reduce consumption of non-renewable resources, minimize waste, and create healthy, productive environments. The bottom line, it's environmental and it's social and economic prosperity. These two images are just showing how, as we were talking about the Heritage Center, we were inspired by some of those earliest buildings in North Dakota, the earth lodges, and our new atrium, our Northern Lights atrium, and how we really kind of were inspired by that idea of a circular environment, the hearth in the middle, the smoke hole, and just respecting that idea of those natural materials that were used hundreds of years ago. There are several principles kind of categorized in 5 categories talking about sustainable design. It's site design, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, and indoor environmental quality. So we're going to take a look at some of these more specifically. But first, just a little bit about USGBS, which is the United States Green Building Council, and then LEED, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. LEED is a way of categorizing sustainable building. There's different categories, there's points. There is looking at LEED certified, silver LEED, gold LEED, and platinum LEED. And as you get up to platinum, those buildings have really incorporated all 5 of those functions, and even going to LEED certified is really good. It's starting to look at the impact on environment, on human health and productivity. That as of June 2015, nationally, there were 29,000 certified commercial projects. LEED also breaks down into commercial, into home, into education, also expansion, remodels. There's a lot of different categories. So these are just a couple of them. And there were over 650 state government projects that were certified. And in North Dakota, they've kind of all been clumped together. It's really hard to kind of follow what actually has LEED certification because it's not a required reporting, so it's hard to kind of track some of this. But there are at least over 20 certified projects in North Dakota. And the picture of this building, it's the Renaissance Hall. It's the NDSU Architecture and Art Building that's in downtown Fargo. And it was the first LEED certified building in North Dakota. And they had a lot of challenges because this wasn't an existing historic structure. And so a lot of time and effort was put into making this a LEED project. And it was one of those projects, I think, that triggered the whole renaissance of downtown. So LEED can be involved in the sustainable ideas, very important moving forward into some of these projects. Some other examples of LEED across North Dakota. Up in the top corner, that school, it's Standing Rock Community Elementary School. It's gold LEED certified. There are several schools, a lot of reservation schools actually, that have LEED certification in North Dakota. The other building on the top is a gold building as well, and that's Great River Energy, and that's in Bismarck up on Century Avenue. So some of these buildings can look very normal, but it can be the functions inside, it can be the materials used that can all contribute to a sustainable environment. And the bottom corner is a Gorecki Alumni Center at UND, and that is platinum. And as far as I know, it's the only LEED platinum building in the state. But it has a lot of glass. A lot of these buildings have glass for natural light. And it has some, probably the brick is locally made, and a lot of the shading has these kind of interesting they sort of look like decorations, but they actually are designed to block sunlight at those peak times of the day. So there's a lot of very interesting design, but it all has specific functions. And then the other bottom image is the North Dakota Heritage Center. Now we built to LEED Silver standards. We aren't certified because it's a very expensive process. It was going to cost $100,000 and a year's worth of very careful tracking to become certified. And we just didn't feel that was the best use of our money. But our architects were wonderful to work with. They had worked a great deal with LEED and really guided us through the process. So we have LEED Silver implementation in this building. It just hasn't been officially certified. And actually, I think there's a lot of buildings in North Dakota that are that way. They just haven't gone through the certification. Also just wanted to mention that the original Heritage Center that was built, opened in 1981, had a lot of actually sustainable methods that were designed into it, even though in the mid-70s when the discussion started on that building, and then built in the late 70s and early 80s, LEED really wasn't a major part of the discussion at that time. But you can see the Heritage Center is the building at the bottom, and just how it relates to the whole Capitol grounds. That's part of it, is how you build into your existing environment. That the building was designed to really save a lot of mature trees in the area. So you can see that from the front and from the back, there's a lot of trees that were actually used for shading during certain times of the day, because there's a great deal of glass in the building as well. That actually this footprint was smaller than originally designed, so the architects pulled it in. And even things like the roof is white, so it reflects instead of absorbs heat. So there's things like that as well that's built into this. A few things about the Heritage Center, the sustainable sites. It's community connectivity, transportation, and parking that we heard some about. So this aerial of the Capitol grounds really shows that Bismarck-Mandan has a lot of wonderful bike paths, and they all connect up with the Capitol grounds. So again, biking becomes a natural opportunity. And then with the CAT system, also our bus system, comes onto the Capitol grounds and connects up with the rest of the community as well. So that gave us some lead points as well. So being able to work with mass transit and biking as well was a great plus for us. Green space and landscaping. That the top picture with the buffalo was our original entrance to the Heritage Center. It was built kind of low into the landscape to really keep the Capitol grounds the focus, but it really respected the existing landscape. And again, the trees, there's sculptures that have been built in for that, kind of the cultural, the quality of life. So there's statues around the Capitol grounds as well that have been incorporated into this. The other image is our outdoor amphitheater, our prairie amphitheater, that up on the top hill is our parking lot. And Phil was brought in to bring that up to grade for the front doors, and it created this large hill. Well, we went back and we terraced that hill and then made an outdoor amphitheater out of it. So it was an opportunity to incorporate that outdoors again. And then with the trees as well, they became the natural backdrop for the amphitheater. This was our kickoff event for the amphitheater in June, and we brought Kat Perkins back from North Dakota. She had done well on The Voice, and she had come to Bismarck and had talked to lots of school kids about music and that kind of thing. So we had a great turnout for that day, lots of little girls in particular that came back. And it was a wonderful venue for music. It's been a great opportunity for Shakespeare in the Park, premiered this summer as well. So it's having these outdoor spaces. We have the plaza again over on the other side that are used for outdoor activities and receptions that are used pretty regularly. So again, combining that indoor-outdoor space. Talking a little bit about our front entrance, that we did a lot of natural landscaping as well, that the circle of rocks that are out on the plaza are cannonball concretions that are about 54 million years old. So we were going back and talking about our environments long ago. So a lot of our building we've used to help interpret the history, the geography of North Dakota. So we've utilized our building in lots of different ways. The top image just shows all these cannonballs came from north of Mandan. We had our contractors look at this and figure out how we were going to transport these things, because each one of those cannonballs were several tons, and even though they're rock, they were very delicate at the same time. So any sharp jar would have cracked these things open. So we created these nests, and we just had a stream of people coming and going. We had forklifts at either end strapping these things. Those are straps, so we kind of cradled them and then picked them up and moved them. And there were spots out on our plaza that you probably saw when you came in today that were created to kind of nest these things and carry the weight. And then also we brought in a trunk that's a petrified tree that's about 60 million years old, that helps to talk about the time period when coal was being formed in North Dakota. So we can talk about the fossil fuel story. Then we also, you can see some green trees. We also have a circle of grass and trees to talk about the other environs of North Dakota. And it's not real clear on this image, but we also have a little water feature. And it's a very shallow pool with some granite rocks. They're glacial erratics is what they're called. And it's the rocks that glaciers erratically dropped out as they started melting. So they're all over our landscape, and it really represents the prairie pothole regions of North Dakota. So we can just talk about our landscape, and this is very low maintenance type of landscaping to use. And the lower image is showing some prairie grass that's been planted out front, that we do have some natural areas, but being on the Capitol grounds, we weren't allowed to do quite as much prairie grasses and natural plantings as we wanted to, because they wanted a bit more of a coiffed look to the Capitol grounds. But we do have some great grasses and areas that really then kind of are highlighting some of those natural plantings. This is looking at our parking lot, a night scene where we have a different kind of grass and some prairie flowers planted here, and then also putting trees in the parking lot to really break up a lot of that surface as well. So it's creating a bit more of a warm feeling, a more habitat for bugs and birds. Then looking a little bit too at some of these other features that we've created these retention ponds, and we have one on the north side of the building, we have one on the south side of the building in the park at the far end of the parking lot. And as they worked on some parking lots on the north side of the Capitol, they put in a big, large retention pond as well. So when we have these large rainstorms that we've had this past summer and snow melt, these ponds can capture that water and allow it to be absorbed, and it's not just all gushing in to the sewer system. So we can retain some of that water, and this is the one image is just showing kind of the remains of some of our water that was retained in that space. We were concerned because we also have our collections on that side underground. So we put in a lot of drain tile and extra precautions so that water was being directed away from the building as well. Water efficiency is very important. Just an example of all of the new toilets and sinks are all motion activated. So it just uses a percentage of water before it shuts off, and that's becoming more and more common. And that's the one thing, a lot of the sustainable building now is really becoming kind of just the way things are getting built, which is really pretty encouraging. So certification might not really become that important because we're just naturally moving that direction. Building orientation, just studying the suns and the orientation of the building. Now our building, the expansion lies east to west. And so we knew exactly what the sun was going to do in our windows. And as an example, in our Northern Lights atriums, we built in shades that would drop down so we could protect from some of that bright sunlight, because it's very bright in that space and then also contributes to the heat of that space. So when we drop those shades, we can control some of that light as well. And in our galleries across the north part of the building, the north half of the building, we ended up putting windows in those galleries. That wasn't an ideal thing to do, but also part of the process was we were respecting the original design of the building that had that corner window. So as we telescoped the galleries out, we want to continue that design element to respect the original building and have one unified look, that we didn't have an old building and a new building. We really wanted a building. And so that created a few challenges for those gallery spaces where light's not the first thing you want next to objects, artifacts. But we also built in curtains on those windows, or we've put screens on the outside. You've seen those images maybe that we've added that actually are a filter. All the glass in the building is UV filtered. And then we've added other screens on the inside of the window to control the light as well. The envelope of the building, all the buildings on the Capitol ground have Indiana limestone. It's just to create that unified look. But the way that limestone is mounted, it's mounted off the surface. So there's insulation going on behind, but then it's also sticking out several inches. So there's airflow around that, and water flows actually behind the limestone and then wicks out. So it's just kind of an interesting process how that was all put on. But also with all the glass we have, you would think that wouldn't be the most natural material to use in northern climates. But actually in our glass box, that's triple pane glass with argon gas between those layers. So it has a high insulation value. And again, with that sun coming in those winter months, that's a passive solar. It's very comfortable in that space. And then again, we can drop those curtains in those summer months. And I should also say too, the windows in those galleries are also an insulated factor to them. So they're large glass windows, but they really have an R factor to them that really have not created problems for controlling heat. Some of our mechanical systems as a museum, They're very complicated systems, and they're taking care of a lot of square footage. Our expansion is 97,000 square feet. So we have 3 separate mechanical systems in this building, with the original building, the archives addition that's on the one end, and then this phase 2 that we're taking a closer look at today. But what we've also done in the Capitol grounds, our facility management team has really computerized all of the mechanical systems in these buildings. So it's controlled from a computer in someone's office. So everybody's office is set, and we can have those adjusted if needed. But it kicks on at 7 in the morning to heat or cool. It shuts off at 5 o'clock. So those evening, night hours when you're not in those offices, we're not using all that energy to heat or cool a space. Now, our galleries are a different story. That this building might not be the most efficient example on some levels, because our collection storage and our galleries, we want consistent temperature and humidity. So those systems are running 24/7. So, but in homes, again, those apps that people had mentioned earlier, you can regulate all these things. So you can heat rooms or cool rooms just when you're using them. The other thing we have in this building is a geothermal system in the expansion. We have 170 wells at 250 feet deep, and they are working for the 97,000 square feet. And I have to say, geothermal has become very popular in Bismarck, especially. It by far leads the state in geothermal activity. There are a number of schools and churches, some of the hospital buildings, several state buildings now all have geothermal wells. And they're very interesting things to have. Our well field is out in our parking lot. So where they're pouring concrete right now, all those wells are below that. It was originally designed to go out into our lawn area, but we didn't want to go there because if we ever expanded again, that would be our only option for expansion. And we didn't really want to do that on top of the well field. So the well field is out in our parking lot, and that happens in a lot of places. So it's accessible if you need to get to it. The other image is the system that operates the geothermal system. So there's hot water, there's cold water, there's returning water, it's a really interesting system, and it took a great deal to kind of learn how to operate that. And I'm not the one who operates that, so it's functioning well. But it's a very interesting process. The upfront costs are not inexpensive, but it pays for itself. And as just mentioned, electricity in North Dakota is very cheap. And we wanted to apply for a special grant for this geothermal system. And electricity was so inexpensive, we didn't have a 15-year payback on it to qualify for this grant. That's eventually going to change. But in the meantime, it was still the right thing to do to put in this geothermal system. And it's actually ground source heat. And what it is, it's there in these 170 wells, they go down, and then as they come up, it's kind of a glycol liquid that's in there. And it's heating as it goes down and when it comes up. And for our building, that temperature when that liquid comes in ranges anywhere from 55 to 72 degrees. Right now, I checked, and this past week it was coming in at 70 degrees because that earth is absorbing all the heat, and that's what's warming this liquid. So when it comes up into the building, if it's coming in at 70 degrees and you're heating offices to 70 degrees, it's not taking much energy to heat these spaces. And then in the summer, it takes that hot air back down into the earth and cools it off before it brings it back in. So it's this liquid that's being heated underground in that natural thermal environment. So many homes are going to this now too. Most homes might take anywhere from 1 to 3 wells. Something that's happening everywhere as well is the lighting that's going on. So our biggest challenge was in the galleries with our track lighting systems, that these systems aren't working quite well to use those, but that's changing rapidly too. A lot of this technology is changing quickly. We also have motion detectors in a lot of places, on the ceiling, the center image, or on a wall close to a door. So lights will just trigger as you go in, and then when you leave, the lights will automatically go off after a period of time when you left. So you aren't leaving a light on in a room overnight or when nobody's in that space. Something else that we used a lot of in this building was fly ash. That one of the big contributions to our project was from Great River Energy, and it was fly ash for this project. And so this is a look at our lower level. This is the hallway going down through the center. And the foundations used up to 50% fly ash, replacing the concrete mixture. And the columns in this building holding everything up has 35% fly ash in it. And now that's becoming a very common thing as well for fly ash to be used. So it's a wonderful recycling process of using that ash from the coal mines after the coal's been burned. And not every mine's fly ash can be used. It has to have certain qualities to it. But Great River Energy, which you'll see also, you can get points if you're within a 500-mile radius of your location, and that fly ash is 60 miles north of here. So that worked out really well. So our parking lot that has the fly ash in it, all the concrete in the building as well. Something that was really exciting for us to find out, we have copper in this building. You saw the walls that surround the big glass box. So we've got this warm metal embracing the glass and steel. All of that copper is 95% recycled material. We had contacted the company because we wanted to know what mine this came from so we could write a label about it and interpret it. And they said, well, we really can't tell you that because it's all recycled material. So from electrical wires that were recycled to die casting in factories, it was actually a better story. So that's 95% recycled materials. Some other recycled things that we've done in this building is the exhibit cases in the Early People's Gallery and Inspiration Gallery. We reused several of our exhibit cases that were in our original gallery. Some of that was cost saving, but it was also just a good thing to do. They were good cases. And then other cases that we couldn't reuse, we offered out to our county and local museums. So we recycled materials, we shared all these. And so we can go out to several of our museums across the state now and recognize cases that we used to work with here. So it's wonderful to be able to share that material with others as well. Then also another example, we had to do a lot of demolition in the existing building. And because the building became so much larger, we had a lot of oak in our ceilings, and it was solid oak, and it was now fire rated differently. So we had to remove a lot of our oak ceiling and put in a fire retardant treated oak ceiling. So this is just showing shelves in our carpentry shop where we salvaged all that oak and kept it. And now we're using it for other projects, building some other cases, and then also sharing that out with some other organizations also, because that was a lot of oak. This is an image of our original gallery, which is now the Inspiration Gallery. It's about 20,000 square feet. That gallery was gutted. And again, salvaging a lot of the exhibit parts, that even down to boardwalks that we had. You can see in our shop area where we salvaged a lot of that wood as well. That, you know, all of that cost a great deal of money to begin with. It's all reusable material. So it's a matter of having enough space to kind of store it till we could use it. But it was really important to salvage as much of that as we could. And then just another kind of quick example in the background, you see that gurney. Our exhibit prep people love to go out to state surplus and they found that gurney out at State Surplus and got it for a couple bucks. And they use it for exhibit installs because the wheel suspension system on it is really good. And so they've gone out there, they found all kinds of cabinets. And it's also a great place for us as we get rid of certain things, we can send it out there so it's available for other state agencies as well. So that's just a great place to pick up things and recycle things. Some other kind of fun things in our museum store, a lot of that exhibit furniture that's in there or display furniture has also been reused from our existing store. And then we bought a few more pieces to fill out that larger space. But again, reusing very good quality and materials that still had a long life to them. The other thing we have done that one of our volunteers in our museum store is an artisan with the Arts Council and weaves baskets. We salvaged a lot of the electrical wiring in our remodeled part of the building. She took that wire and wove baskets, and now we're selling those in the store. She also cut some of that grass that we saw out in front of the building, and she's weaving baskets out of that as well. And she's eventually going to have those ready to go for the store as well. So just fun little recycle projects like that. And then also just commenting on, there is no recycling program on the Capitol grounds yet for plastic and newspaper and all those kinds of things. The facility management procurement are working on that. It's not a cost-effective program to be doing that, but we're really pushing, trying to get that implemented. But in the meantime, at the Heritage Center, we've just kind of started our own recycling program. So we have the boxes around the building, and we have like these blue buckets down in our staff lounge, and we collect the tin and aluminum and paper, and we recycle it ourselves. I just, once a week, take it in my car and take it to a city spot and recycle it. It's just too much material to just be putting into the garbage. And we do have cardboard recycling that a business does come and pick up that. Regular typing paper, computer paper, we can recycle as well. So a lot of those kinds of things are being taken out by other vendors. But the rest of it, the plastic in particular, it's just amazing how that can accumulate. And we really need to be responsible and do what we can. So we're just taking care of that ourselves in-house. And then aluminum, you can pay for that or get paid for that. So that's just going into our little fund in-house to take care of some other staffing events. Regional materials. Again, you can see the pin where Bismarck is located, that 500-mile radius of, again, being able to get LEED points. And the granite that's in this building, the darker stone across the bottom of the building, comes from Cold Springs, Minnesota. And so that was within the 500-mile radius. Now they just opened a business here in town as well. The limestone comes from Indiana, but I wanted to mention it, and there's a close-up of the limestone. That limestone comes from the bottom of ancient seas. So it's crushed up calcium from shells and that kind of thing. So if you look in some of our walls, we can use that limestone to interpret the geology of the area as well, that those little spirals are seashells. So it's kind of fun to, again, just be able to use those building materials to help interpret that bigger story then that leads into North Dakota history. Clean construction is important. So covering vents, keeping building materials up and dry or covered, and it's just really important so as you start your systems, they're not full of dust. Also, all the paint in our project was low. It's VOC. It just means it doesn't off-gas. And some of the cleaning products have been a bit of a struggle using that. They just don't work quite as well. So custodians are a little challenged by them. But then some of the building materials we use, like in cases, are wheat board that has been produced in North Dakota, MDF. They're both non-formaldehyde materials, so they're good for cases and that kind of thing that you have artifacts in. We buy that in bulk, so we have that ready to go as we produce our own exhibits in-house. Lighting, the daylight, a couple shots down by our cafe, our auditorium hallway that you'll walk into, just having that natural light come in, so lighting isn't always needed, but creates those warm, inviting environments for productive workspaces. Just showing some of the environmental connections. These are Northern Lights out on the Missouri River in Bismarck, our Northern Lights atrium. So we've tried to incorporate that idea of the environment and making the awareness of our surrounding environment in this building as well. And I just wanted to comment on three of our historic site interpretive centers as well. This is the Confluence Interpretive Center up at Fort Buford, and it was designed to fit into the environment. It's a circle. It, again, represents that Native American philosophy of the circle of life, of earth lodges and teepees. This is looking at the building from the river. So there's also a large plaza there looking out onto the confluence of the Missouri and Yellowstone River. There's also a geothermal field up there. The Pembina State Museum was early geothermal field, and also it has quite a small footprint to it, but it also has this large tower so you can just get up and you can almost see Fargo from Pembina. And then the Chateau Interpretive Center out at Medora, reusing part of the existing interpretive center and then building on respectfully for the environment, to fit into the environment and to replicate historic structures that, in a slightly different point of view, those two little cupolas are there. You can stand there and it frames the chateau that's up on the bluff behind it. So again, just working into the environment, that those Badlands are exquisite, unique places, and we wanted to respect what it had to offer, and then even with our sign, having some of those natural materials incorporated as well. And just that night shot of the Heritage Center, you can see those screens again, respecting the Capitol as the focal point, and you can see that we still water the grass out there, even though we really wouldn't want to. But that's what we've been working on for the last several years. We had a lot of discussions with our architects to really kind of ingrain some of these processes into our operations with our staff. Anything else?
Thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, thank you.